Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Smash the like button if you love me. Subscribe if you're new. Please have your say. A very warm welcome. How did it happen? How did Western entertainment, how did Hollywood and English-speaking entertainment find itself on its knees? Most people blame the culture war, and it did play its part. But before the dark times, before the apocalypse, before the extremism, before the propaganda, I take you back to the early noughties. I started to realize something very, very interesting, that the finances were being withdrawn from cinema, the theatrical system, and they were pumping money for the first time, and lots of it, into television. People like Ron Howard were investing in the 24 series starring Kiefer Sutherland. That show was made like a feature film. It was a feature film once a week for 45 minutes. It was revolutionary, it was breathtaking, and it was the kind of groundbreaking entertainment we needed in cinema. But instead, for the first time, Hollywood started to value the television system. This had never happened in the history of the industry. And there was born the binge model. All of a sudden, you could buy 24 box sets, Alias box sets, Lost box sets, Prison Break box sets, Smallville box sets, and binge them at home. And then the streaming model was, born. Because from DVD binging, we went from binging on Netflix. And at the beginning, this was a pioneering idea because they were buying up stuff from other companies, from all the studios, all the television networks, making them money. And we were paying our monthly subscription to binge whatever we wanted on the internet. It was new. So we were very, very excited. But all of a sudden, with the binge model in at Netflix, and you were able to binge your DVDs and your TV box sets like 24, all of a sudden the cinemas were becoming empty because there was no variety in cinema in the early noughties because they were putting big money into television. I remember even to this day going to the cinema and seeing a big epic cinematic trailer for the premiere of the Lost television series. All of a sudden, the industry had changed tact. The money wasn't on the big screen, it was on the small screen. But what Hollywood loved to do is oversaturation. So what happens is the oversaturation happened on television with the binge model. But 24 and Alias and shows like this were the beginning of the golden age of television. It lasted from around 2001, I would say, to around 2011, 2012 at best. All of a sudden, there was a downturn, and the quality in cinema was being reduced and reduced and reduced. And all of a sudden, with your Netflix originals, they would oversaturate the market. Then the big studios decided to go with streaming as well. Disney Plus, HBO Max, Paramount Plus, the oversaturation of a good idea. It's a bit like going out with your girlfriend for 18 months, then moving in with her. When you're not living in the same house and you can't hear her snore or she can't hear you snore, she's the best thing ever. But it's only when you live with her and you have to spend every flipping hour with her, or she has to spend every flipping hour with you, it's too much of a good thing. And this is what Hollywood always does. It gives you too much of a good thing. Now, as I say, although we had the Lord of the Rings trilogy in cinema, the Harry Potter franchise, and the Dark Knight trilogy, there was no reality. There was no variety. There was no, Field of Dreams. There was no smaller movies. Because what had happened all of a sudden with the influx of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it became purely about money. 20, 30 years earlier, Hollywood was still about the corporate system, but there was a place for arty movies that weren't going to make as much money. And they would use the summer blockbusters to hold the industry up. There was a variety. But once we got to the early noughties, that variety had gone. And with the, infrastructure of streaming and the binge model and everyone wanting to get into the streaming game, they oversaturated the system. We went from like one MCU movie every 2 years to 5 MCU movies a year. The oversaturation of an industry. Too much of a good thing. Then came the kind of groundbreaking moment, if you like, when Martin Scorsese did his wonderful, huge article in the New York Times, basically insulting the Marvel Cinematic Universe and calling it out for not being cinema. There was a tactic behind this because Disney were buying up every screen. This issue had already been brought up by Quentin Tarantino years before. And it was a big issue because no one had screens anymore unless you were Disney, unless you were the Marvel Cinematic Universe, unless you were Disney Star Wars. Then we had The Last Jedi, which was called out by many fans. It was an insane time where fans who complained about that movie, yes, were called Russian bots. If you can't remember that, I remember it. I was there. Many people were upset by that movie. I was underwhelmed rather than upset by that movie. All of a sudden, we got to 2016, then the culture war began. The insulting of the consumer, the middle finger up to the consumer. We know best. Activists were brought in and the talented people were driven away. And then you get a series like Velma, which is racist and bigoted. It is. That's what it is. It is unwatchable. I don't even know how people could be bothered to hate watch it. But well done to those people because you exposed what was going on in Hollywood. And now we're here now in the middle of the Writers Guild of America writer's strike. SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Union, is about to lobby their members to vote for strike action as well. Potentially we could have the actors and the writers on strike. It's not like I don't agree with the reasons the Writers Guild of America are on strike. But back in 2007, 2008, when they were on strike, consumers like me were saying, oh my God, no 24, no Prison Break, no Smallville, what will I do? I cared. When you're making quality, you're able to hold an industry to ransom by having industrial action. But when your industry is on its knees and it's producing, well, I don't really want to start talking universally about bad stuff and good stuff. But for me personally, the stuff they're making isn't for me. And I don't care if they go on strike. They can go on strike for eternity. But the issue is very, very huge right now because it's about artificial intelligence taking over the role of the writers. We started off with the Writers Guild of America saying they wanted to reduce what AI do. Now they want it banned. There's more talk about wanting it banned. So this issue isn't going to be settled tomorrow or today or the next day. This is huge. This is big. This is not just about them getting paid more money. But if they didn't oversaturate their industry, if they didn't give the consumer the middle finger with projects, like I've just mentioned already, like Velma, we'd be in a different place. All of a sudden, the industry became over political, extremism, propaganda, and you've driven the consumer away. You've tired the consumer out, and we're seeing through you. The creative bankruptcy because you drove all the talented people away. All of a sudden, it became an industry saying that straight actors can't play gay people, that, men can't direct women, only women should direct female-led projects, that all of a sudden it was all about representation and inclusion. The problem is we're talking about an industry that hate outsiders, and they're talking about fake representation and inclusion. So we are now here on a line where the Western industry, especially Hollywood, are on its knees. And you've all brought it on yourselves. As I said, you can't hold an industry to ransom when you've got nothing to offer the consumer. I know a lot of you in Hollywood will be waking up this morning realizing that Bob Iger is going to take away a lot of your content off Disney Plus. And I've noticed you're all very, very angry because you won't be getting your royalties anymore. If you're wondering why your content's being withdrawn from Disney Plus, it's because it adds no value. You see, they were happy to humor you with your propaganda and extremism and those kind of projects you were making. Projects like Velma at first, and I know that's HBO Max and WB rather than Disney Plus, but it's the same thing. You know, the reason your projects are being withdrawn is because they have no value. No value to the business because nobody wants to watch what you've made. Now, I don't want to sit here. Again, I'll say, I'm not going to start talking about universally bad content or good art. That's basically, that's up to the individual person to decide what's good and what's bad. That isn't for me to decide. But as someone who calls himself movies TV man, someone who's been watching television and cinema since he was a small boy, someone who thought every member who made this stuff as a kid, I thought these people walk on water. I want to be these people. I want to work in Hollywood. I want to be a creative. I want to be an actor. I used to practice my acceptance speeches on Oscar nights. It was a dream. Hollywood was a place of magic. I remember watching things like E.T. as a child and thinking, wow, the magic of Hollywood. The magic of Hollywood. Let me repeat that again. The magic of Hollywood. Now there is no magic of Hollywood because they do not believe in escapism. They believe in realism, and they believe in messaging, and they believe in extremist leftist messaging. There was always political messaging and propaganda in Hollywood, but not on this level. We had lots of anti-war rhetoric in different movies like Casualties of War and Born on the 4th of July, but it was done in a very brilliant way where you could actually be educated as a young person about war and what went on, especially in Vietnam. And it educated you and it made you think about the folly of war. But right now, they're getting the sledgehammer and smashing you over their head. And the sledgehammer has cracked our skulls open one too many times. So I want to make this clear. The streaming model is dead, and you can see it. Iger is doing exactly what Zaslav did with Batgirl, and it's only going to get worse because they've got this streaming model, this worthless streaming model. They thought they were going to, beat Netflix at their own game, and Netflix are just about breaking even. Why do you think Netflix now want to charge per person? What they're using, why they're changing how they charge people and things like that. It's already going to start. In America, they're changing the way they're charging you. If everything in the garden was rosy, this wouldn't be the case. They were fine with family members using another family member's account before. When they were doing well, they're not doing well anymore because Netflix have played their part in the extremism and the propaganda, right? They've played their part. One of the biggest parts, there's this controversy about the whole Egypt thing right now. And, Egyptian people are rightfully very, very angry because, how dare Western culture dictate, what is factual in history for the Egyptian people. But of course, arrogant Hollywood have always tried to dictate what goes on in the rest of the world. Don't forget, this is the industry that invaded a country, murdered its natives, and then in films, in Western films, they had those natives as the villains. I mean, never forget what this industry has done. Now, most of the new kids on the block talk against this and probably agree with me, but what happens is the reason there's so much representation and inclusion, they want to make up for the lack of it in the past 20, 30, 40 years. they're they're going over the top, replacing, basically replacing straight white males with minorities and women. Basically, it's an act of revenge from the extreme left. Basically, they have driven the consumer away. But now it's not just about the culture war. They've driven the consumer away, mostly because of the culture war, but now there's a civil war in Hollywood, and the writers are angry. They're on strike, and corporate Hollywood don't know what to do next. They keep on ruining things and ruining things and ruining things. The Marvel Cinematic Universe was at its height. Then they decided to go for the representation and the inclusion thing and the gal power thing. Look where that's got them. They thought they would make money whatever they did. Ultimately, entertainment is and this is what this industry has forgotten. Entertainment is a consumer industry, and you can't buy the hand that feeds you. The bite that feeds them is you and me. So now this is where they are. They are in trouble. This industry has never been in more trouble. And there's no fooling the consumer anymore. So this is why there's a lack of empathy for the writers on strike, because these are the people who have delivered things like Velma, Peter and Wendy. Why should we have any sympathy for you when you're attacking a section of your customers every 5 minutes? When you've found a way to resolve these problems and you get your deals, whether you're the Writers Guild or SAG-AFTRA, whoever you are, once you've settled your differences, you have to think again about how you talk about the consumer. And the powers that be at Hollywood have to go back into making entertainment that works. And these reboots and relaunches need to be reduced. They need some originality. They need to go back to film schools and find new writer-directors, new creatives who actually want to do something special. Because right now, it's the same people doing the same thing. You've got a ridiculous situation where some idiot decided to take Indiana Jones 5 to Cannes. Anyone who did that deserves to spend the night with Dexter Morgan. It's insane. Because what's interesting about the Cannes Film Festival, a lot of people who don't know nothing about it think it's another Comic-Con. But these are the most brutal people in film, consuming film. They even basically castrate the films that they like, let alone the films they don't like. And Indiana Jones 5 is getting a really raw deal because it's not the type of film you take to Cannes. So it's crazy. It's crazy that someone came up with the decision to take that film there. But this is where we are today. We don't have the titans of industry running Hollywood anymore. These people are so greedy, they keep on trying to make more money, more money, more money. But the more bad decisions they make, the less money they make. And this is no more evident than the bumbling of the DC Extended Universe, where they made all the wrong decisions from day one. Then they tried to fix the decisions they made by doing things in the wrong way, instead of saying, Snyder's not working, he's not making us the money we want, it's very angry, the audiences are divided, we just need to start again. No, they didn't do that. Let's basically reconstruct what Snyder did, put it in a round bowl, and let's hope for the best. And Justice League was one of the darkest moments in Warner Brothers history. I can't imagine the titans of the entertainment industry, the titans of Hollywood back in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, making a decision like Justice League. And this is where we are today. But even the Indiana Jones, the latest and apparently the 5th Indiana Jones film, now Iger's saying there could be more of these films. I think this film's going to be a disaster at the box office. We'll have to wait and see. But this is what know-nothings you've got. And this is why I talk about oversaturation. They should have stopped with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Basically, the public told them everything they wanted to know after Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. The audience hated that film. I thought it was solid. I thought it was okay, but there was no need for it. Their need to keep on milking an IP and a franchise has really brought them, on their knees. And now every time I hear we're getting a reboot and a relaunch of this, we're going back to revive this show or this film series, and I'm just like, oh God. Or we're reimagining something for a new generation. How can you reimagine something, Hollywood, when you lack an imagination? That's another problem with these people who work in this industry today. They lack vision and they lack imagination. And this is how, everyone, Hollywood is down on its knees, because the consumer has left the building. They can moan, they can do their own little TV shows and talk about this writer's strike where they tie the male writers outside on the leash while they have all the female writers on camera. You can keep on going. I'm sure you're very, very good people, but you don't deserve to get, you don't deserve respect just because you work in Hollywood, because many of you shouldn't even be there. It's the analogy of Mr. Bean turning up at a hospital and doing an operating procedure on a patient. It's the same analogy. There's so many people now in this industry who are activists who don't have the ability, don't have the imagination and vision to entertain people, because they don't want to entertain us anymore. They want to lecture us. As I say, Hollywood has always been somewhat political, but it always knew how to do it in an entertaining way. It's basically over, everyone. Thank you, Hollywood, for the memories, but it's game over for you. Since 2016, we've seen more and more creative bankruptcy, and it's going to continue. Now, I'm a 50-year-old man. Maybe I'm looking at the history of entertainment and Western entertainment, Hollywood entertainment specifically, with rose-coloured glasses. But I have great memories of the great movies and TV shows growing up, even up to the early noughties with 24 and Lost and shows like that. But it all ended. It all ended in the mid-noughties, and that's a shame. It can be saved. It can be brought back. You just need a bunch of people to understand, to want to create great entertainment back. And when you need it and when you want it, that's when the consumer will return. That's the reason that they're cutting jobs at Disney and Warner Brothers Discovery, because the consumer isn't consuming as much as they used to. They want to employ more and more writers. Now, the Writers Guild of America have made that demand on these shows, but there's already too many writers per show and per episode, because the binging model has seen a reduction in television episodes, because the era of the 22 to 24 episode season is dead. Now, in a lot of ways, I agree with that, because I think that's slave labor. How they used to make 24 episodes of 24 a year, I mean, it's outrageous and such good quality. They can't even make 6 good episodes of any TV show anymore, and that lies the problem. The people who used to make the great stuff are gone. They're either too old now, but there are ways of solving these problems. And, obviously AI is a huge situation, and it's happening in every industry around the world where, they're replacing normal, everyday human beings. And this situation will create famine and poverty in places that before were living the high life. But it's beyond AI, it's beyond the issues that are being spoken about, because you can't hold an industry to ransom when there's no consumers left to care if you're there or you're not. This has been Movies TV Mad. I'm Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.